Welcome, everyone, to episode 7 of the Strong as Steel podcast. I'm Scott Lunny. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the director of District 3. And I want to start by acknowledging that we are on the unceded and stolen territory of Coast Salish people, in particular the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I just wanted to acknowledge that last month, all of the staff of District 3 took our Unionism on Turtle Island course, and I just really would encourage locals and area councils around the union to look into that course. It's a lot, but it really helped us to learn about the history of colonization in our country, understand what it means, reconciliation means, and then start to explore ways that we can act as individuals and collectively as an organization to reconcile with the Indigenous peoples across Canada. And so I'm super excited about this episode. We have the Canadian National Director and the Assistant to the Canadian National Director here in Brett Barden's office at District 3. I will let them introduce themselves in a second, but I just want to first shout out to Brett, of course, who is much of the brains behind many of the things we do in District 3, and also Tyler, our man behind the cameras and behind the computers and all that, who does the podcast for us. So we're excited to be in episode 7. It's big, the Strong as Steel podcast. And now that we have Marty and Meg here for this episode, it's going to be even bigger. So I'll let the two of you introduce yourselves and maybe Meg, just a bit about yourself.
Go ahead, Meg. Meg's
okay, up. I'll go up first. Meg Gingrich, I'm the assistant to the National Director, she, her pronouns, and I'm happy to be here and very excited to talk about what we're doing out of the national office.
I'm Marty Warren. I'm your National Director, Canadian National Director. And I just want to say, Scott, this is just a great forum to kind of get our message out. And I've seen some of them, just some great work. And I guess what I would want to kick off with is just telling all our members, because I try to do this as much as as I travel and get to talk to folks, that I want to say to our members and our local union activists and leadership, just thank you for everything you do each and every day. I know being an activist and a local union leader, it's a lot of conflict each and every day, and you are making a difference, and I thank you for that very much.
That's great. Thanks for kicking it off with that, Marty. I appreciate that. I just need to know what Dominic paid you to wear a District 5 shirt on the District 3 podcast. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, that's good. We all work together as the Canadian directors. So which is one of the reasons actually Marty and Meg are here is we meet regularly as the directors and assistants across the country for the 3 districts in the national office, and we just talk about what's going on, which is kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about on this podcast, what's going on nationally in terms of our union. So one of the things, I guess, that's pretty new, Meg and Marty, and I don't know who wants to talk about it, is some of the stuff that's happening with the federal government. And, not everyone's fans of the Liberal government, but the NDP and the Liberals made a bit of a deal. And part of the deal was a couple things. One was pharmacare that I understand there's a little bit of progress on. And the other one is anti-scab legislation that the federal NDP got the Liberals to agree to enact, which I'm not really sure where the anti-scab is. So I don't know if either of you have an update on those two things.
I can start, and I'm sure Meg can jump in and kind of fill in the blanks. First, I would say that when this agreement took place, I was kind of unsure. But I can tell you, with a party with only, about 25 seats, I could be wrong one way or the other, about 25 seats, they have done so much to change the landscape of Canada. Whether it be $10 an hour daycare, working with the provinces to get that in, and I know there's some bumps and bruises in that, but at least it's moving forward. Whether it be the dental care, where we see less fortunate people, we're starting, there to be able to have access to dental care. And then pharmacare, as everybody's heard by now, or will hear in the very near future. It's small steps, but the framework's going to be there. And it's going to start off with some diabetic drugs and contraception, and that's going to hopefully, you got to work with the provinces because healthcare is kind of provincial, but it looks like the through the NDP and the Liberals, it's going to start to happen. And then one thing that's a starting point, I should say, a starting point of hopefully many more drugs to follow. And anti-scab, something that's very close to labor and how important it is for us. We know that, BC and Quebec have it, but no other provinces do. And for the federal government through the NDP and the push of the NDP to get federal regulated workers, that anti-scab, that replacement work legislation to level the playing field is going to be a great victory. Some concerns. As you may know by now, it's going back to the House. It'll then be bounced into committee. While it's in committee, we'll have a chance to say our piece and have the other activists speak up on it. It's not perfect right now. There has to be some work done on kind of the maintenance side of it about if you are to go on strike, what is necessary and what's not necessary in a strike in terms of keeping the facility open. Obviously, we need somewhere to go back to work, so we need to do certain emergency kind of things. But I think the problem is some of the stuff that I've understood where contractors that were here before the strike could stay, whether there's a right to bring in students. I just don't see how that's going to work. But and the biggest frustration right now is the length. The Liberals are talking 18 months. We've been clear it should happen now, should happen immediately. The NDP know where Labor's at. And so that'll be one of the biggest struggles, that if it's good enough in 18 months from now, it's good enough to get royal assent sooner than that or right away. Meg, thoughts on...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. Our main push will be to ensure that there aren't, a bunch of loopholes in there that render it ineffective. And so I think that's something that we'll have to really keep our eye on. And we've been pushing for this for decades, so we know exactly what we want to see in this. So we'll continue to push for that. And then, the enforcement, when it comes into force, we want that to be immediate and not after 18 months. We don't want this dragged out, as long as it. As they're saying that it will be. And so we'll keep pushing for that immediate enforcement once it comes into force.
And if I could just mention, Meg, I may need your help on this because I don't know a whole lot about it. There's a lot of moving parts, but around the sustainable job legislation, I know the NDP have pushed hard with the Liberals to try to get it, at least the framework passed, so we can start to put the pieces together, what that could look like. And Poilievre and the Conservatives have been doing everything to stop it from taking those next steps. Again, just the framework. Just any thoughts on that, or can you add to that?
Yeah, and then this is another piece. This came through the supply and confidence agreement as well, and it's imperfect, but if it ever does go through, it will give workers a chance to really have a say over planning as we move to cleaner economy. And that is something that affects our members across the country, and I know in particular in District 3. And it's not always easy, but I think one of the main things is for us to be there and to have a say over this. And the Conservatives have essentially tried to prevent that when it went to back to the House in the fall, in December. They tried to insert 20,000 amendments as a way of filibustering this, and it was pushed through. But what happened with that was that instead of being able to hear from workers about what they wanted from this legislation, because of those attempts by the Conservatives to delay this, we never got to actually say our piece on this. And so they claimed to be speaking on behalf of working people, but they actually prevented working people from saying what they wanted to see in this legislation. And so that's something that we're going to continue to push for, and to make sure that it's as good as possible, and that workers and unions in particular are right there and have a say over our futures as it comes to any sort of clean economy investments and so on. And you were not kidding when you said 20,000. Like, you're not exaggerating for effect. It was literally like... It was literally 20,000.
20,000, yeah. Which is really... And we're talking about legislation that does, for the most part, like, give or take, for the most part, just says that workers have a place in discussions about the future of workers when we're changing things in the economy, and that's what the Conservatives are opposed, is workers just even having a say or a place at the table, or a front and center place at the table with stuff that's impacting them. And yeah, I just think that one's crazy. The anti-scab I know is important to our members. We had a federal labor dispute out here with Rogers, and that was definitely an issue, is the ability under the federal legislation, which doesn't exist in BC, to bring in scabs, and so that was really important. I know in Quebec, I think there was quite a lengthy strike, and the ability to bring in scabs, and I'm sure this happens in other jurisdictions as well, where there's not anti-scab legislation. It makes labor disputes worse. It makes labor disputes more intense. It makes them longer. It doesn't let the parties exercise the real power that they have at the bargaining table to get a deal. Because ultimately, in the end of the day, you got to get a deal. And scabs just lengthen the dispute, make it harder to recover from, and it seems like a no-brainer, but the businesses and the companies and the right-wingers fight so hard.
And that's one of the things that when I've had a chance to talk about anti-scab legislation, when you introduce scabs into the workplace, they're normally from the community. It splits the community. It divides workers, and it's generational before you can get back to some normal labor relations. And so normally what happens, somebody that's making that decision, they're long gone in 2 years, and the rest of us are dealing with piss poor labor relations, and rightfully so, all because somebody made a decision instead of go to the bargaining table, finding a settlement, they brought in scabs. And to your point, definitely harmful.
Yeah, kind of a cute story, and I may have the dates wrong, but there was a faller strike in the late 60s, early 70s, and the guys in the local on the island were telling me there was a guy, they still called him Scab Jones, 35 years after the dispute was over. He was forever known as Scab Jones because he worked during the faller strike.
And the other thing I should add that I don't, some people may not realize that we have approximately 80,000. Am I right on that, Meg? Is it that high? Or is it less than that?
It's a bit less than that, but it's tens of thousands of
in the
members.
Federal.
If you think all the railway folks, interprovincial transportation, any trucking that we have, anyone in uranium, telecom, right?
And I think with the TELUS, with what TELUS is faced with every time they bargain, this can be a game changer. Yeah. Like we say, level the playing field.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I know not everyone, like I said at the start, not everyone was super big on the NDP federally making a deal with Trudeau, particularly in the West, not super popular Trudeau in the West, but I think we're starting to see some fruit from that supply and confidence agreement. And, if we can get, if they actually pass anti-scab legislation, they move on pharmacare, like you said, Marty, there's the child care stuff and dental care. Like, those are positive things that you're going to be able to point back to and say, at least they're trying to make the federal parliament work.
Yeah, to take those amount of seats, whether it be 25 or a little bit one way or the other, and create that much leverage, that much power. And we know, too, at the end of the day, the Liberals are going to claim they did it. Come election time, look what they did, look what they did. They only did it because the NDP made them do it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I did want to talk about a couple other things. March 8th is International Women's Day, and so we always want to acknowledge that. But one of the things that the national office has embarked on is pay equity, and I know there's legislation federally around pay equity, but we do have a staff person who's truly an expert on pay equity, Jan Borowy in the national office, that's working with the federal locals. But that will be a thing provincially, I believe. I hope coming soon in all the provinces. I think it already is in Quebec, a thing, right? Pay equity. But anyway, I don't know, Meg or Marty, if you wanted to talk about sort of pushing forward on pay equity through the CNO.
Sure. Yeah. So there is already proactive pay equity legislation in both Ontario and Quebec, and that's what the federal legislation is modeled after, where there is a proactive responsibility to actually do an analysis of the workplace and to see if there's any systemic discrimination, women who are essentially underpaid for the positions that they're in. So we're fighting for equal pay for work of equal value. And so even though, we're doing this now in part because we have to, but it's also something that as the labor movement and we as steelworkers have fought for decades. And so we're here now, and we have very strict deadlines in terms of what we have to meet in setting up pay equity committees in all of our federally regulated workplaces. And so Jan Barawi, who, as Scott said, is literally the foremost expert on pay equity union side in the country. I would say she worked as a lawyer for many years on this file. She's working out of our office and has worked probably with many, people who are listening with Local 1944 and with others in the district and then across the country. And so she's working hard, very hard right now to make sure that we have, that our staff and our local unions are trained on their obligations and what we can actually get out of this, which is real material benefits for women who've been systematically underpaid because the work that they typically perform is not valued as highly as other people's. And so this is a real opportunity for us through this process to make sure it's not just about meeting our legal obligations, but actually ensuring that we get the most out of this for our members. And so that's going to be going on throughout this year. And then even once we've, the pay equity plans are in place and all of that, we have to do what's called maintenance. So we have to continually review the plans and the work that our members are doing, and we'll want to continue the push at the provincial levels to make sure that every province does have these this legislation.
And Scott, if I could just add to what Meg said, and she did mention it, but there's work to be done. There's work to be done by our members, by our local union leaders, and by our staff and by our organization to make sure that we don't leave any money on the table. And then, as Meg said too, then the next challenge is to keep it, the maintenance up on it, and to make sure we have trained people that can help with the maintenance in each location to make sure it doesn't fall behind. Because so often, we do something and then it slides kind of away. So huge project, just a real opportunity, and lots of work for our members, our activists, and our union.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Like a lot of our folks think, well, look, we pay everybody, no matter what gender you are and you're in whatever job you're in, you get paid the same everywhere else. But that's not what it's about. It's about the value of certain jobs systemically, how they're valued in a corporation or across a corporation. And what it really means, it's like job evaluation, really, that so we have in mills and mines and stuff like that, where you look at the job and you value, what the value is. But it's looking at all of the jobs, including the ones that aren't, production. And in a lot of workplaces, the production jobs are valued higher than some of the other jobs that are in the company. And that's what it's about. And it's really, like Marty said, about making sure we get every penny that our members are entitled to be paid, and the systemic undervaluing of women's work and in our country and in our provinces is it's real. You can see the real wage discrepancy between male-dominated and not male-dominated jobs. And so, it's an important thing, and I've really been impressed. I just want to say I've really been impressed with Jan. Very knows the issue
we
up
are
and down.
Very fortunate, and she does have expectations, and we need to kind of help her make sure she can follow through on those. Yeah. The other thing I'll say, just through Ontario pay equity legislation, provincial legislation, I can tell you our university sector, they will tell you some of their biggest pay raises or gains for workers has been through that process, even more so than collective bargaining.
Yeah, and our folks that have job evaluation will know that. You can get significant pay bumps by looking at jobs and really assessing the value in those jobs and getting the compensation for it. The other thing I wanted to talk while I have the two of you here is about, and I think this is something that we maybe don't talk enough about is the work that we do on trade issues, and certainly there's trade issues around steel, but there's also been some other sectors in District 3. I know there's been mattress trade cases, and there was one about I say transformers. I don't know if that's the technical term, but some plants we have in southern Manitoba that make electrical transformers, and there was a trade case. I know that's all run through the national office, so I don't know. Just maybe talk a little bit about the trade stuff.
Let me tee this one up. Well, I got to tell you, Meg, it's her file. She does some amazing work with it and on it. And day to day, Meg carries some very heavy water at the CNO, and I couldn't do what I do without her. So, Meg, over to you for your thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah. So we have been involved in trade cases for a number of years. And so it is primarily with steel, but as Scott said, we've also done cases in a number of other industries. And I think also some even with wood products. But basically what happens is, and any locals who've been involved really have positive feedback to say about this, because they get really involved in showing the trade tribunal essentially the impact of unfair imports on their work. And it's a real chance to show people who really mostly look at, they look at numbers and they hear from employers and like that, and to make those numbers actually real, to see how important a lot of this production is to communities and to workers and to sustaining communities. And so, we had the large power transformers. We were successful in that case. And we have a number of cases coming up in the coming year. We have some folks from Evraz involved. Mostly steel will be upcoming, but we did get some really major reforms in the last couple of years that the tribunal now takes into account the actual impact on workers. And so they look at collective bargaining outcomes, they look at pensions, they look at benefits, things like that. And many of our local union members go to Ottawa to testify in these cases, and the tribunal really wants to hear from workers on this. And to the point now where there was one case recently where we made such a small amount, I can't remember the exact product, but we made such a small piling pipe, that's what it was. Such a small amount of this product it's in District 6. But it accounted for something like under 1% of their production. And so we tried to tell the tribunal, this really doesn't, affect us all that much. But they were so intent on hearing from the workers that we had to fill out these, large questionnaires about the impact of these unfair imports on our members. And the local union is very, very heavily involved. And so it's almost to the point now that whenever there's a case involving steel, we can't say no to participating. We're going to be there. They want to hear from us. They want to hear from workers. And so it's been really great on that front. So that's one aspect of it. But we also look towards sort of larger trade issues. So the trade cases themselves are somewhat reactive. We see, imports coming in, unfairly subsidized goods. We'll try to get an order on those so that they can't come in as easily. But then we also want to look at sort of our larger issues on trade and making sure that, and I know that in District 3 you've done a lot of this, but as it relates to steel, but also aluminum and other manufactured products, is their carbon footprint. And so ensuring that we're actually using lower carbon products in Canadian infrastructure projects and having legislation and regulations surrounding that. And that's one way we want to be sure that we're also increasing the markets for the products that our members make. And so we've done a lot of work on that, pushing for changes so that, that you're actually using these products in Canadian infrastructure projects. So we want federal, legislation regulations around that. And then working with our, with the international to make sure that, Canadian products can be used in U.S. infrastructure products as well. And also looking to further reform some of the trade laws so that we actually have standing in trade cases. I won't get into all the legal details on what that means exactly, but basically we're trying to build up our presence in trade cases, but then also looking towards larger trade reform so that we're that we have a robust steel, aluminum, just generally manufacturing industries in Canada, and there's a bunch of ways that we can do that. So I don't know if now's the time to mention that we're looking to have a national steel, Stand Up for Steel conference in Ottawa in June, and so that's tentative. We hope to get the word out officially to locals soon, where we can go and actually go to Ottawa and push for some of these things there. And so I don't know, Marty, if or Scott.
Hopefully, I know we're just kind of finishing that up to really kind of tuck it down and get the word out, but pretty exciting stuff, and it's time we do it. The only thing I wanted to comment on, it's so good to see the tribunal. They don't want to hear from Marty or Scott's. They want to hear from workers and the impact on them and the impact on their overtime and the impact on their community. So that's a big step forward.
Yeah, I'm always so impressed. And I think we need to let everyone know that we're doing it. Like, it's our union that's doing that. It's our union that drives a lot of trade stuff in the U.S. It's our union that got really pushed for the changes to allow more participation for workers and unions in the trade cases in Canada. We're continuing to do that. And to Meg's point, sometimes it's a small portion of the product that we're talking about. So there's a ton of folks that aren't in our union that are benefiting from our work on the trade files as well. And other union members from other unions. And it really is something that we're at the front end of, and I recognize there's a massive amount. I mean, Meg summarized it in 5 minutes or whatever that was, but there's a massive amount of work. I know that there's continuing discussions with the folks in the States that do it, and Meg and others that we have working on these files, and it's really something that we should be very proud that our union does, and it's driven out of the national office. So again, thanks to the two of you for getting that stuff done.
A lot of people do a lot of work on it, and it's another component nowadays that you've got to be involved in, to Meg's point, to protect our industries, to protect our manufacturing. And if you're not doing what we're doing, you could be in trouble. So
yeah, for sure. This is gonna be one of our shorter podcasts because we're a little bit under a time crunch. I squeezed this into Marty and Meg's schedule, so thanks again for doing it. I know you rushed from the airport and we're rushing off to another meeting.
Happy to be here.
But I did want to talk a little bit about just the international and I don't know. I think the dynamic, as folks know, I'm just 2 years into my term as the director and pretty new on the International Executive Board, but along with a lot of other folks that are pretty new on the International Executive Board and including just the directors and assistants around Canada. And I feel that, there's a lot of positive going on at the international as well as nationally with us working together really closely together with the District 5, District 6, District 3, and the national office. Marty, you've been on the board for a while, and wonder what your thoughts are about where we're headed as a big international and as a national union. First
of all, lots of change, and I'll give you an example in a sec here. First of all, on us being an international union, everybody's got to remember how important that is, because we can talk not only to Ottawa, we can talk to Washington on issues at the same time. And I can tell you that after the last election, I think I went from one of the younger ones to one of the older ones in a matter of an election, which is super healthy for our union. Turnover is great, energy's high, new ideas come forward. And to Scott's point, there has been a lot of change, and quite frankly, there's probably going to be a lot more coming up in the next election, and that really gives our union an opportunity to kind of reinvent itself. Just look at future leaders and where our union's going to go, and have those new people that are coming onto the board decide the path of the union, the future of our union. What does it look like? What do we do? How do we better service? How do we better do trade cases? And I can tell you that since I've been on the board, so excited about right now, today's board, the skill, ability, and just how, the energy to get things done and to make change and protect our members and protect workers as a whole. And I just think that's going to continue. As I've said, I think you're going to see more change in the upcoming future, near future. And I think that's all super positive for our union. Change is healthy.
I say my little quip is that it only took 82 years for the first woman director on the International Executive Board, which took place not that long ago. But then I say it's not going to take 82 more months for there to be more positive change like that. And I'm really optimistic about where things are going. And I know, lots of us are. And, it's nice to be not even the youngest person on the board at 50 or, whatever. Yeah. And we got some young folks coming up, and a lot of the staff and assistants are young, and there's a lot of new energy, Absolutely. New ideas, and just at least talking about things, doing things maybe not the same way we always have, just because. And looking at,
it's almost like if you've done it this way for 10 years, it's time to look at it to make sure you want to do it for another 10, or is it time to change that, right?
Yeah. I was looking at one of those books that we put out, and I think it was 2018. You were one of a handful of the folks that are still there from 2018, just because of retirements and change in the districts. And so I think that's a positive thing. I'm really excited. So
I'm the old guy. Yeah. I'm near the top 5 or so.
I do want to,
which is a good thing.
And I do want to acknowledge that, just so folks know, the Canadian National Director is an officer of the International Union, and so Marty's an officer, and Marty he's a leader at the International, and I do appreciate that. You speak not just for Canada, but you speak on lots of stuff, because of your position and because of the time on the board, and I think it's helpful and it's useful. So I appreciate that. And
I appreciate that because, like I said, if even on a Canadian problem, we go to the U.S. and say, "Here's the Canadian problem." I've never ever seen them reject it. They more wrap their arms around it and say, "How can we help? What do you need from us?" And we do the same for them.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we are getting near the end. I did just want to highlight, again, we talked a little bit, there's going to be a Stand Up for Steel campaign relaunched, which is coming up. I don't know, it's usw.ca/campaigns/Stand Up for Steel, all one word. So you can find out more online about that. Just thank you both for being part of our podcast. It's big. It's going to be big. It's rising up the charts and trending
it's on the
and
trending.
all that kind of stuff. And
it's
going to be even further up the charts now that you've been on. It is episode 7, and I appreciate everyone continuing to listen or watch if you're on YouTube to our podcast. If you have any comments or questions that you want to send in, d3comms@usw.ca is the email address to send us feedback. Hopefully constructive feedback, but we take negative feedback too. And remember to follow District 3 anyway on social media, but follow the national and the international as well. But for District 3, we're at USW District 3 on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Right? Yeah, Brett's giving me the thumbs up. See, it's 7 times and I still don't have it right. And don't make me try and list all the podcast channels that you can get it on, but you can get it on most of the podcast channels. So again, Marty, Meg, thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all the work you're doing in District 3. You can see it. You can see the solidarity. And yes, thank you very much.
You're forgiven for not wearing a District 3 shirt. So again, thanks for watching the Strongest Steel podcast. Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Brett. And of course, Meg and Marty, thanks. And join us next time, which will be episode 8 in April.